Hello everyone, this is Jason Merkel from Horizon Hobby, and we're out at the William Bennett Flying Field on the east side of Las Vegas today to show you guys something very exciting. This is the E-flite F-14 Tomcat Twin 40mm EDF, and I know a lot of you guys have been waiting on this for a while. We've been working on it for a very long time. There's a little bit of a delay getting it to you guys, but the good news is if you're seeing this video right now, you can use the links that are down in the description below in that first pinned comment to order one today, get it in your hands today. That's very exciting. You know, part of the delay was to make sure that we got everything just right, and in the end, the result was exactly what we were hoping for. We were hoping to have an F-14 model that more people could fly, more people could afford. So in this case, comes in under $300 in the United States, and it runs on a 4-cell 2200 milliamp battery. It's very important to us to use a battery that a lot of people already have, a lot of people already have access to, or if you don't have them, they're actually not very expensive to buy. That's really nice. But of course, the most important thing of all, we had to have that functional variable sweep wing. That was the absolutely critical point of this. I mean, that's what makes an F-14 an F-14. It works great on this particular aircraft. There was a lot of tuning and tweaking to get that working well, to get the software working well, to help with the transition, so on and so forth. But the end result is, again, exactly what we were hoping for. The best part about this airplane, though, or my favorite part in particular, is it arrives fully factory assembled. Just like our ultra micro aircraft. Of course, this is not an ultra micro airplane, but a lot like those, it comes in a nice big box with a handle on it that works as a storage case or a transport case. It's great for storing and transporting the model safely. You open the box, you pop it out, and it's basically ready to bind to your transmitter right from the get-go. So real quick note on that. Today I'm using an NX8 transmitter. This is more than you need. You do not need an 8-channel transmitter. This just needs a minimum of a 6-channel transmitter. Of course, you've got the 4 basic functions: throttle, you've got nose gear steering, you've got Tailor-on control, which we'll talk about here in a moment. So those are your first 4 channels. We also have channel 5 for our SAFE Select, which is optional use. And then we have channel 6, which is for our variable sweep wing. So again, need a minimum of a 6-channel transmitter. However, you do need to have a Spektrum transmitter, and it needs to be a computerized transmitter that has programmable flight modes. So I know a lot of you guys are thinking, oh, what is a flight mode? I've never done that before. Flight modes essentially allow us to have different aileron and elevator trims for each of the wing positions. Because each sweep of the wing changes the aerodynamics of the aircraft, the trims are slightly different in each of those positions, and so by using flight modes, we're able to have independent aileron and elevator trims per flight mode. So usually there's just a little bit of difference in that. We'll get to that here in a moment, but it's important to note that you have flight modes in your transmitter. Basically, almost all of our DX Gen 2, Gen 3s, our NX transmitters, of course, IX transmitters have that flight mode feature built into them. Also very important, if you buy one of the aircraft that comes in our first batches, it will have one of these yellow addendums inside the box. It may be taped on top or maybe sitting down inside with the airplane. If you got one of those, make sure you follow this. It's extraordinarily important. Everything that's in here trumps what's in the original manual that's also in your box. Now, there are some other details in that manual, so you'll still want to go through those. But when it comes to things like, for example, the radio setup, you're going to want to follow these setup guides here. We've got one for the DX transmitters, NX transmitters, IX transmitters. This basically walks you through step by step how to set up the transmitter, how to set up those flight modes, how to configure your different travels and your rates and your expos. Of course, some of those things are a little bit personal preference, but it's very easy. It doesn't take very long to set these up at all. So make sure that you follow this. It talks a little bit about SAFE Select, and that defaults to channel 5, which is the gear channel on most transmitters. Most Spektrum transmitters, that's that big 2-position A switch in the back here. And so SAFE Select is always on by default. You don't have to utilize it if you don't want to, but it is there. Very important if you're going to hand launch, though, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. On the inside of this, though, is probably the most critical element of all that we've found. After a lot of testing, a lot of checks on a lot of random aircraft, we found some variations in the trimming of each aircraft. So the number one thing to do is when you pull the aircraft out of the box, get it all bound up and get it on the bench, you want to set your Tailor-on position per this guide. It's got a note in here, 5 millimeters above a mold line. You can look in the manual or look in the addendum to see that specifically. So before your first flight, you need to adjust your linkages to make sure your Tailor-ons are in that position. Then the next step is, once you do go out and fly, you need to electronically trim the airplane with the wings out, with the wings in the mid sweep, and all the way in the fully swept position. Now, I do that over a course of a number of flights. My first flight, I just take off with my wings out, fly it around, trim it out, land it, no problem. Then I take off with my wings out, and then the second flight, I worry about trimming it with my wings in the mid sweep position, go back to fully out to land. And then the third flight, I do my fully swept position. From there, you'll want to take a look at your trims. Your goal is, because you do most of your flying with the wings in the outward position, your takeoffs, your landings, and again, fair bit of flying with the wings out, You're gonna want to then mechanically adjust your ailerons so that your trims are zeroed out when the wings are in the out position. Usually that ends up resulting in less trim required for your mid sweep and also then your fully swept position. And it's very important that you don't have a ton of trim, because if you do, you'll get sometimes like a roll more to the left than to the right, some other odd behaviors. So it's extraordinarily important with this model to do the extra trimming in each of the wing positions, as again, each of the flight modes, to reset the mechanical trim after your first trim flights. That's also very, very critical for a lot of reasons. We see some people that are struggling with airplanes that are a little bit too far out of trim. And if you're carrying more than, say, 40 points of trim, that's usually a problem for getting good performance and good control out of the aircraft. So very, very important to follow that here in the guide. We also do talk a little bit about hand launching. We'll have some information down in the description and in the first pinned comment about hand launching, and hopefully link you to some videos that show a little bit about that as well. Real quick note on that, if your plan is to hand launch this airplane, which you can do, especially if you've got some grass like we have here behind us, I still strongly recommend making your first flights with the landing gear. Take off and land on a runway, even if you have to drive a little farther to go to a nice field. To do that, it's easier to get all that trimming stuff out of the way before you then try to hand launch the airplane. It's not impossible to hand launch this airplane. It's a little different compared to a lot of aircraft because it's relatively small and there's a lot of things going on. Of course, you got the wing sweep, so on and so forth. The trim is slightly different when you take the wheels off, but as long as you've trimmed it with the wheels on, it's gonna be very close. Just a couple clicks here or there. So a lot of good information again in this addendum. Also on our website, we now have the updated manual. So down the road, some of you guys won't get this yellow addendum in the box, that's okay. You will then have the updated manual that has all of this information inside as well. Or again, you can skip the addendum in the old manual and go straight to the new manual on our website. That is already there on horizonhobby.com or on the E-flite website as well. So really, really good stuff there. Again, you don't need more than a 6-channel transmitter. That's very, very nice. And then on the battery, we again designed it around a 4S 2200. So today I am using a Spektrum Smart 4S 2200 30C battery. Now, a real quick note, you only need about a 30C battery. So at full throttle, using the telemetry, which is really cool, this does have built-in telemetry. Whether you use smart batteries or not, it still works. I could see that I was pulling around 38, 40 amps, give or take, depending on the battery and depending on the temperature outside. So you don't need a very, very powerful battery per se to fly this. You just need a good solid 30C battery that, like what we recommend, the Spektrum Smart LiPos are great. The one caveat here is that the battery compartment is tight. We tried to keep the airplane size as small as possible to work well with the 4-cell battery, and so that did make the battery compartment a little smaller. Not every 4-cell 2200 battery will fit. This is very important. If you want to see if the batteries you already have will fit, I strongly recommend using the link down below to check out the dimensions of these 4-cell 2200 milliamp smart batteries. The 30C and then the slightly longer 50 and 100C, they all fit. The thickness and the width fit just perfectly into this battery compartment. So we didn't build this airplane to force you to use smart batteries. We just designed it to be as small as possible to get the best performance out of a 4-cell battery. In this case, a lot of Spektrum Smart LiPo batteries are smaller and lighter for the same cell count and capacity compared to a lot of other brands. So the easiest thing to do is just buy one of these smart batteries. They work absolutely fantastic. There's a lot of great benefits. Of course, the self-discharging, the auto-discharge of storage, that's my favorite feature. But a lot of good stuff in there. So be sure to check out those dimensions to see if your battery will fit. It's possible yours may not fit and you may need to buy a different battery. And you really can't fit different capacities of batteries. It wasn't designed to fit 2600s or 3200s or anything like that. But with a 4-cell 2200, the flight time can be anywhere from about 3.5 to 4 minutes if you fly it really aggressively, upwards of, I've stretched it out to 6.5 minutes, flying a little bit more conservatively. Granted, it's an F-14. It looks a lot cooler and it sounds a lot cooler flying around at full throttle. So I do a lot of that flying at full throttle myself. And again, the nice thing is if you have a Spektrum Airwear equipped transmitter, you will actually have real-time telemetry, including the voltage of the battery, the RPM of the motor, the current draw of the power system, the temperature. There's some really, really good stuff here. What's nice about that is I can set my timer and I can fly to my timer, but I can also, instead of my timer, focus on my low voltage alert on my transmitter. It's set by default at about 3.4 volts per cell. When I get to that during flight, my transmitter will alarm. Usually that's a good 30 seconds or so before the ESCs start to go into LVC. So then I know to land. So sometimes we fly harder, sometimes we don't fly as hard. And so flying to the voltage alert is sometimes better than just flying to the timer. But I often use both still, but I'm starting to get more and more used to using the telemetry myself. So that's a really nice feature. And then real quick, we did talk earlier about ailerons. And not everybody knows this, but the full-scale F-14 doesn't have ailerons. It uses ailerons for control as well. So the two stabs move as elevators and also as ailerons. And what's cool is we've actually programmed those so as you sweep the wings, it adjusts the amount of travel, both aileron and elevator, that you have in each wing sweep position. So, for example, when the wings are fully swept, the airplane flies more like a delta wing airplane. Now it's got a shorter span, so if we didn't give you less roll authority, it would roll incredibly fast. So we actually have less aileron and more elevator when the wing is fully swept. And then when the wing is all the way out, or again in the mid-sweep position, there's also some differences there. But we have less up and down elevator and more aileron and more roll control. What's really cool is the guys did a phenomenal job of programming this, so the whole thing, the transition happens so clean and so smooth that I can transition during turns. No problem. I've done transitions doing a roll for fun. It's really amazing the work that they did between the developers and the engineers to make that transition as smooth as possible, to adjust those controls based on the wing position, so you don't have to set them in your radio. All of that is done in the flight controller for you. You just set your rates and everything one time in your radio, and that's it. And then everything else happens in the flight controller. I really, really love that aspect. And then another quick note, this airplane does have SAFE Select, and that is important to have, especially if you're hand launching. When you're hand launching, it senses the G's from when you throw it, and it adds some up elevator to help your hand launch when you launch it with SAFE on. So I always launch this thing with SAFE on. Now, as an experienced pilot, which you need to be to fly this aircraft successfully, you're not gonna be using SAFE very often. I will admit though, because it's somewhat small, because it is gray, it can be hard to see and hard to tell the orientation, especially with the landing gear off. SAFE has saved me more than once when I wasn't sure if I was right side up or upside down, especially when I had the wings fully swept. So SAFE is kind of nice to have in that regard. But real quick, let's talk about the skill level required for this model. This is not a first RC aircraft by any stretch. You should never learn to fly on an aircraft like this. You won't succeed. You need to fly on a trainer aircraft first. This is also not a good first EDF model. So if you've flown other RC models, but you've never flown an electric ducted fan or a turbine jet, this is not a good first. In fact, I don't think it's a good second. I would strongly recommend it as a third. So for example, something like our Habu STS or our Habu SS, both the 50mm and the 70mm, those are the phenomenal best first ever EDFs that are out there. Then of course we have our F-15 64mm and our Viper 70mm. Those are great second airplanes, EDF models. Then once you've mastered those, and especially if you've flown something like our F-16 or any of our 80 or 90mm jets, you can then more than likely fly this product successfully. So this is one of our higher skill level products for a couple of reasons. Number one, you gotta set up those flight modes, not super complicated, but you have to take that extra time to trim it. You also then, when you're flying it, you have to have good visibility, you have to have good control. It's not particularly hard to fly, especially when the wings are out. It actually is pretty darn easy to fly, and it's a lot of fun to fly. It's pretty mild-mannered with the wings all the way out, but when you sweep the wings, it flies different. It does handle more, again, like a delta wing, so it's important that you have the extra skills required to trim the model properly, to fly the model properly. So that's a whole lot of information, but before the sun goes down, let's get this thing into the air because I'm really excited to show you guys how it performs. I really love these twin EDF power systems. So it does not have rudders, but it does have a steerable nose wheel, which is nice if you're using the landing gear. So that does help with taxiing. Now we don't really have much wind at the field today. In fact, almost no wind at the moment. So I'm gonna taxi down. So I did spend a little bit of time adjusting my trim on my nose gear so it taxis pretty straight without a lot of input. That's important to do. Some guys have said that they don't think it has a lot of power, and that's not necessarily the case. In fact, you know, it may not rip off the ground like some EDF jets that have a 1-to-1 thrust to weight ratio, but you'll see it has a really cool, almost scale-like rotation and then pull off. I am gonna take off and land with the wings in the outwards position. That's just like what the full scale did. That's how most people like to fly it. All right, here we go. So bringing on the power at full power now. I'm gonna start pulling back and you'll see it'll rotate nice and easy. Look at that. It just looks so good and it sounds so good. All right, I'm gonna turn it around and bring it back down. Downwind, there isn't really any wind, but we'll bring it back down the runway so you guys can see how fast it is. It is no slouch, on speed or on power. This is the wings all the way out. Oh, it sounds good. And again, it's not super difficult to fly at all, especially with the wings out. But as you sweep the wings, things change a little bit. So real quick, I'm gonna just do a roll. Show you I can easily do a roll, no problem. That wasn't even full aileron travel. pull it back over the top here and roll out. Do a quick loop with the wings all the way out. And I am using 100% rates, the high rates, pretty much the whole time. Also, a really quick note on that, and I'm going to transition to the mid-sweep position. So you can see I kind of came out of a roll and into a turn. I went ahead and swept the wings to the mid-sweep position. A real quick note, if you ever fly with SAFE Select on, whether it's this airplane or any airplane, you got to use high rates. Otherwise, you won't have enough control. High rates give you the maximum bank angle and pitch angle. Low rates cut that back considerably, makes it almost impossible to turn in a lot of cases if your low rates are too low. So you guys can see it's a little faster with the wing in the mid-sweep position, just a hair. It still does look cool. Of course, you can do rolls, no problem. I didn't do any inverted flying when I had the wings all the way out, but it does that very easily. Bring it around here inverted with the wings in the mid-sweep position. Pretty cool. And in a turn here, I'm going to go ahead and sweep the wings all the way. Now, I don't necessarily recommend transitioning during turns to most people. Also, I think for a lot of people, they're going to maybe want to transition the wing while they have SAFE on, and that's okay, totally understandable. But you can see now, it looks different. It's a little faster yet with the wings fully swept. I will say, a little harder to see, so orientation's a little more difficult when you got the wing fully swept. Some guys have said, hey, it's harder to turn when the wing is swept. Now, it does fly more like a delta wing, so it bleeds energy a bit differently. You got to fly and manage the energy a little bit better, but you can see you can turn it pretty tight. You can bank and yank. You just can't bank and yank quite as hard as you can with the wings all the way out because it does seem to, you know, again, bleed that energy off a little bit more.
20 seconds.
But real quick, I'm going to show you that even with the wings swept all the way back, of course, you can perform loops and rolls. And I will admit, with the landing gear off, it's quite a bit faster. It does look a lot cooler, but I've got the gear on right now, so there's a little bit of a roll, and I'm going to pull into a loop.
2, 1. Time expired.
I'm going to go down here, and my timer did go off. I haven't heard my low voltage alert on my transmitter yet, so I'm going to go ahead and put the wings all the way out, and I'm going to turn it into SAFE real quick and show you guys. I've got SAFE on. I'm at about half throttle now with the wings out. It'll fly relatively slow and simple and easy. And again, I've got high rates on, so look, I can turn pretty tight with SAFE on. Now check this out, if I go to my low rates, which are only 70%, look at how much shallower the bank angle is. Now it takes a lot longer to turn, and that's why whenever you fly this model or any model with SAFE Select on, you always need to be in high rates. If your high rate's 100% and our maximum bank angle is 60 degrees, if your low rate is 50%, you're only gonna get 30 degrees of bank. So bring it down nice and easy here, show you. Yeah, look at that. And again, guys, it has plenty of power. It's about 80 miles per hour level flight. Could be a little bit faster with the landing gear off. It's probably almost pushing 90 with that, or even 100 in a dive. But I'm gonna bring it back by one more time in a high speed pass with the wings out.
1 minute.
But yeah, it's no slouch, look at that. All right, let's set it up for a landing. And landing it with the wings out is not difficult, guys. It actually is very, very well mannered. The important thing is keep the nose up, and you can kind of, you know, land it really, really like a scale aircraft on the mains first. I'm gonna carry just a little bit of power on my final approach to help keep that nose up. Like you'd see that. You can hopefully hear I'm keeping the power on, keeping the power on, keeping that nose up, and just gonna kiss those mains. And there it is. Now it's important, a lot of EDF jets, let them roll out a bit, you know. You don't wanna turn too quickly, too soon. Sometimes you end up on a wingtip if you do. I'm gonna taxi your back here. It's actually got really, really good ground handling with the landing gear. That steerable nose wheel is nice. It's got relatively soft tires. It kind of sticks. It's got really good stance on the gear. And there you guys have it. The E-flite F-14 Tomcat Twin 40mm EDF. I'm really excited that we have this on the lineup. I'm really excited you guys get your hands on it now. Again, be sure to check out the description and the first pinned comment below for links to the aircraft itself, some other videos, especially some information on hand launching in particular, the updated instruction manual, the batteries we recommend, transmitters we recommend, all that good stuff. Thank you.